People have changed. I don't know any other way to put it except for people have changed. I've seen it. I know you've seen it. Let me know down in the comments below if you've just seen a shift in the way people are in general, the way society is in general. I'm really starting to believe that this timeline that we're on, there's something wrong with it. I mean, I've gotten to where I don't believe anything because everything is so screwed up. Everything is so up in the air and everything is always changing. But over the last 5 years specifically, we have seen changes in society, in the world, that are unprecedented, unlike anything we've ever seen in such short periods of time too. That's the other thing. Sometimes I feel like I'm living in an alternate reality. I don't know what happened to the reality we used to live in, but it is not here anymore. And there's a few things that have really made me realize this. So the first thing, and this is the one that actually started this whole path of my mind going down these rabbit holes into thinking that something's seriously off. So I grew up in Kentucky. I was born and raised here. And if you know anything about Kentucky, you'll know that the Kentucky Derby is held here. And it's a huge event. It's one of the biggest sporting events in the entire country. I would say probably one of the biggest sporting events in the world. Horse racing is a huge deal here in Kentucky. And even though I'm born and raised in Kentucky, I had never been to the Kentucky Derby up until a couple years ago. It's something I always wanted to do, especially back in my younger days when I used to drink and stuff, because if you know anything about the Derby, and specifically the Derby infield, you'll know that it's always been considered one of the wildest parties in the nation. And for good reason, because a lot of crazy stuff goes on there. They call it the Mardi Gras of horse racing because people run around half naked. They dress up in these crazy outfits, mud fights, porta potty races. Everybody gets completely trashed. And it's essentially just a massive wild party of thousands and thousands of people. And while back in my younger days, that was something that would have appealed to me, I always wanted to experience that. And even after I stopped drinking, I was like, you know what? I want to go see this because sometimes I just want to watch the chaos unfold around me. So back in 2022, I went. And I went for that specific reason, to watch the chaos unfold around me. I wanted to see the massive party. And I walked into that event thinking that that's exactly what I was going to see, only to be extremely let down. And to say things had changed would be a massive understatement. I walked in there and there was nobody getting drunk. I mean, there were people drinking, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't a massive party. People were in suits and ties. Women were in derby dresses. Everybody was just kind of standing around, somewhat socializing, somewhat just kind of sitting around, scrolling their phones, not really interacting in the way that you would think people would interact, especially for the Derby infield. And do me a favor, if you don't believe me on this, if you think, okay, well, you just never been there, maybe you didn't know what to expect, Google, right now, Google Kentucky Derby infield party photos. Just Google those terms, and you're going to see the craziness that I'm talking about. And that was back all the way up until about 2020, and we're going to get to that in a second because there's a few reasons why I think this is happening. But all the way up until about 2020, that's the scene that you would see there. But what I experienced was something completely different. It was like I had been pulled from that reality, from that timeline, and placed in a timeline that was completely unrecognizable. And the whole scene, the whole environment, my surroundings, just the way people were interacting, and everything about it, it felt very robotic. It did not feel natural. There's something that was just very off-putting about it. I don't really know how to describe it. That's why I'm kind of struggling with this, but something has changed. That's what I'm getting at here. And again, if you think that maybe it's just because I had never experienced it before, I'll give you another example, and this is another big one that tipped me off to the fact that this is happening. Along with the Derby comes Derby festivals. Leading up to the Derby, we have a bunch of different things. There's like food trucks, there's fireworks shows. They have a big balloon glow where they fly those air balloons, hot air balloons and stuff around. A lot of different events go on. Well, back in the day, I used to go to the fireworks show. It's one of the biggest fireworks shows in the nation. The last time I went back in 2010, around 2010, somewhere around there was over 500,000 people there. It's a huge, huge draw because there's an air show and all that stuff. And that event is not as crazy as the Derby, but it's always been a party scene. You bring your own alcohol in there. Everybody hangs out on what they call the Great Lawn. Everyone is socializing. We used to set up volleyball nets there, and we would play volleyball and cornhole, and we would literally like section off an area where we would all go gather. There'd be like dozens of us. A bunch of our friends and stuff would gather there, and it would just be a big party. It was a great time. So after 2010, I didn't go to this for many, many years, and then I went again in 2022. And just like the Derby, to say things had changed is a massive understatement, because it was not like that at all. There was not 500,000 people there. It was less than half that. A lot less than half that. It wasn't even packed at all, and it was beautiful weather outside. So that was the first thing. The second thing was that nobody was interacting or socializing or doing any of the things that we used to do back a decade prior to that. The timeline, again, completely shifted. It's like I was removed from that timeline and thrown into this completely different timeline that I simply don't even recognize. And just like the Derby, the entire experience, because that is what I was actually used to, was being able to socialize with people and have hordes of people around me and just have a great time. It took me out of the experience. It made me pretty freaking uncomfortable, actually, because everything about it felt very robotic. It did not feel natural. There is something that has changed with people within just a decade's time, where people just aren't the same. They're not acting the same. People don't socialize. They don't interact the same way they used to, and it's very strange. It's a very strange phenomenon, and it's pretty off-putting, actually, especially for someone like me who considers myself an old soul. I've always said that I was born a century too late, because the new way of doing things, all this new way of interacting and being robotic and all this weird stuff, it just simply doesn't align with me. And I've noticed this in other places too. And again, let me know in the comments below if you've seen this, but social gatherings specifically, events, grocery store, supermarket, anywhere out in public, I've noticed this change. The way people are, just the way people are. And I think about like the Mandela effect, and I wonder, like, am I imagining all this? Like, am I imagining a different way of doing things? And maybe I've just been thrown into this new timeline and nobody told me things changed. But I specifically remember everything being drastically different than what it is today. If you go out in public, and again, especially social gatherings, bars, clubs, stuff like that. I was just reading an article the other day about how hundreds and thousands of bars across the nation are closing because nobody is going out and doing that kind of stuff anymore. And you have to wonder, what's the reason behind that? Is it just the fact that people aren't going out in public? Have people grown out of that? Where have all the people gone, and why aren't they interacting in those types of environments? Why aren't they interacting in general? What has changed? And you wonder if this is a good or a bad thing, because if people aren't going out and they're not partying and drinking and stuff like that, is that necessarily a bad thing? I guess it depends on the way you look at it. In my opinion, I think it's a bad thing, because when you don't socialize and you're not interacting with one another, then you're missing out on shared knowledge, shared experience. And without that, we as a nation, as a society in general, will eventually collapse. Because when you don't have shared knowledge and you don't have shared experience and you're not sharing your story and interacting with one another, then things will eventually become stagnant. You cease to grow. There is no more progression, because you're not passing on the things that you've learned. Because shared knowledge and shared experience is a fundamental aspect of what makes us human. It's what sets us apart from the beasts in the wild. Throughout all of history, it has been a fundamental aspect of us getting to the point to where we are today. So if we stop interacting with one another and we stop sharing this knowledge and we stop socializing, then society in general will eventually collapse. It will cease to exist. Or at the very least, we won't progress. We will become stale and we will become stagnant, and that is going to cause us to regress. It's going to cause the de-evolution of our species, and that is essentially what I believe is happening. But what exactly is happening? What is the reason that this timeline has shifted so much and people are so robotic and they've changed in such drastic ways? Number one, I think 2020 has something to do with that. I'm not going to say the name of the event that happened around 2020. You all know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't want to mention it because platforms have been banned for less. All right, so I got to mind my P's and Q's. But something about 2020 and that event has caused a shift in people. I don't know exactly what it is. Maybe it's the fact that people have just given up on each other, because back then people were so willing to turn in their neighbor for not complying, not doing what they were told. That event has also caused people to lose a lot of trust in other people and society in general. It's also caused people to get comfortable just staying home. Because back then we had to lock down, we had to stay home, be in our homes, not go out in public, not socialize, not be around other people. And maybe some people have just adapted to that. I don't know exactly what the reason is, but there's something about that event in particular that has caused a drastic shift. But that's not the only thing. I think there are other factors. Social media, the internet, cell phones, all these things, technology in general, I think has also caused this, because instead of going out and interacting, we now have all these friends on our phone, these fake friends on our phone that we can go to, we can interact with, we can get instant validation and gratification from, we can get dopamine from this handheld electronic device. And we don't need to rely on people for that anymore. We have everything that we could ever possibly need in terms of socialization on our cell phones, on social media. And a lot of people have turned to that. And I really do believe that that is one of the driving factors that's causing the de-evolution of our species. Or at the very least is going to eventually lead to that, because it's causing us to stay trapped in this digital realm instead of actually stepping foot outdoors into the great outdoors, or at the very least going out into public and talking to other people. It's causing people to become very robotic and emotionless. We are actually becoming the electronic device that we hold so dearly, and that's a terrifying thing. And because that's making people emotionless and robotic, it's also degrading the moral fabric of society. It's very dehumanizing. People have taken the human aspect out of things, and again, it's just becoming more robotic. Instead of being empathetic to people and having emotion towards people and feeling sorry for people, it's kind of dividing us. Even though we're more connected more than ever, we are more divided and we're more lonely than ever. And I think a lot of people have given up on other people because of that. We've realized that people simply aren't worth it, because for some of us, we give to other people, but it's not appreciated. And it's also not reciprocated. People have just become very rude. And in a lot of cases, we've just kind of given up. We've said, you know what? Interacting with actual people isn't worth it, so we're just going to stay in our phone. That's the safe place. That's where we can get our instant gratification. That's where we are appreciated, so let's stay there. Let's not go out into society. Let's not do all the things that we've done throughout history, because it's simply not worth it. And all these things have also led to a tremendous amount of division. And not just those things, but everything in life now has us completely divided. If there's something we can disagree on, not only are we going to disagree on it, we're also going to allow that to completely divide us. Everything from race, religion, sex, politics, food, everything has divided us. And I truly believe that's another thing that has caused people to say, you know what? People simply aren't worth it. I'm not even going to try. And the same can be said about men and women. We have actually let this division creep in between men and women and separate relationships, separate marriage, separate connection, because we are no longer connected in the way we were before. Instead of being connected and going after the opposite sex and being willing to approach a woman and all these things, we don't do that anymore because we're afraid of being shamed online. And it's a lot of that has to do with these agendas that are being pushed, because there are a lot of agendas out there that are 100% geared and designed to divide us. And the bad part about that is that they've done a very good job of dividing us. And to top it all off, now we have AI, which everybody says is going to eventually replace us. And I can't help but think that the more we get wrapped up in all this technology, the worse these problems are going to become. And the worst part about that is that instead of rejecting that, we seem to be embracing it. And not only embracing it, we seem to be asking for it. We are actively instigating our own demise. And that's a terrifying thing. And we have to ask ourselves, where does all this end? Where do we go from here? Do we continue to allow these things, all these things that are working against us, to continually chisel away at the moral fabric of society and strip away all the things that make us human, the things that separate us from the beasts in the wild, until we are at a point to where we are completely reliant on technology and all these other factors for our main mode of communication. At what point do we say enough's enough? And we push back and say, you know what? It's time to step up. It's time to push this technology away, get away from this robotic way of doing things, step away from this new timeline, and get back to the old ways of doing things. Now, I'm somewhat of an optimist, and I don't believe that's where this ends. I don't believe that it ends in us getting completely disconnected from one another and being completely reliant on technology as our main mode of communication. I believe that us standing up for ourselves and pushing back on this is going to happen a lot sooner than we realize. And I truly believe that the way out of this is exactly that. It's about getting back to the basics, getting back to the simpler ways of doing things, getting back to approaching people, talking to strangers, getting to know our neighbors, socializing, having physical communication and physical interaction with one another. I think that's the way we dig ourselves out of this hole, and we reset this timeline that we've created for ourselves. Because this timeline, it kind of sucks, and the direction it's headed is not looking good. Because if history has shown us anything, it's that the way we have progressed, the way we have gotten to where we are today, is because we were able to share knowledge. It's because we were able to leverage the things that make us human, communication specifically, and use that to progress, use that to advance ourselves to become the dominant species on this planet. And I know that by doing that, it means making yourself uncomfortable. Because fact of the matter is, approaching people, socializing, interacting with one another these days, it's not as fun as it used to be. People are rude. People aren't grateful. People probably won't appreciate the fact that you're approaching them and trying to talk to them. But even if it's not appreciated and it's not reciprocated, we have to keep trying. Because if we give up and we allow these things to happen, knowing that each and every one of us holds the power to make incremental changes to reset this timeline, then we're part of the problem.